Comics in the classroom. A long-time stigmatized idea exists that comic books as a medium are juvenile and inferior. They possess no opportunity for learning and instead are simply silly and stupid stories for kids and dorks. In this video essay, my aim is to disprove that myth and show evidence as to why comics are a valuable and great tool for learning in any content area at any level. The idea for this project first came to me in February. I was sitting in a final year education class as the class was engaged in a mass group discussion. I was paying half attention while I sketched some designs for my new series of webcomics I'm working on. But something caught my ear as a student raised her hand. She scoffed at the idea that Shakespeare's works have been translated into a comic book format and are readily available for reading in many school libraries. She thought of this as nigh blasphemy, shocked at the idea Shakespeare had been dumbed down into the inferior medium of comics and graphic novels. To be completely honest, I was furious to hear such a biased and utterly ignorant display of such an aged and outdated stigma from someone who is to become a certified teacher next month. But I was surprised to see that most of the class joined her in chuckling at the thought of Shakespeare as a comic book. I have taught Shakespeare, and in my time tackling Shakespeare for learning, I have learned very quickly that at least 70% of students, even in a drama class, are going to hate it. It's really hard to wrap your head around and digest the Old English and iambic pentameter, and this hurdle of understanding can quickly alienate students into writing off Shakespeare as a whole. So then, why shouldn't students be able to experience these stories in a more digestible and approachable way? It is important that these stories be told and understood, as hundreds of years of retelling them has shown. But for our students who struggle with the language barrier of Shakespeare's works, or even a language barrier to English as a whole, is it not reasonable for them to have an easier access point like a retelling through a comic? The same drama, tragedy, and emotional core of the story is there, but in an easier to approach and understand delivery. So where does this stigma come from? And why does it still into the question, what comics should we use for learning? There is a plethora of examples of phenomenal comics that connect directly to course material. Take, for example, Sugar Falls. Sugar Falls tells an emotional and heartfelt story of a young girl and her experience living in a residential school. It demonstrates in a powerful way the trauma and abuse residential school survivors experienced and shows the utter resilience they needed to survive. This short graphic novel is an easy and digestible way to create understanding about one of the dirtiest, nastiest sins of our history as Canadians. And the book touches on all the important themes regarding residential schools that the curriculum requires. It also connects better to visual learners than a textbook or novel medium, and allows them to flip back and forth at ease if ever needed more understanding. Another phenomenal example is the book Maus by Art Spiegelman. Maus was a series of 2 80-page graphic novels created by Art Spiegelman interviewing his grandfather about his experience living as a Jewish person in Europe during the Holocaust. The book uses animals to depict the different groups involved in creative metaphors for their role in the events of this time. Most prolifically, it depicts Jews as mice and Nazis as cats. The metaphor is obvious, yes, but also digestible to almost anyone, and very powerful nonetheless. The book is powerful and beautifully illustrated that it connects the materials to students in a very visceral and emotional way. The book really helps the reader to connect to the characters and creates a deep sense of empathy for the mice as a metaphor for the Jewish people in the story. 150 Years Retold is a Winnipeg-made graphic novel, about 200 pages in length, that connects Indigenous writers of all different backgrounds with Winnipeg-born cartoonists and illustrators to tell an anthological series of stories focused on different Indigenous groups, their ways of life, their culture, spirituality, and their history. The book is beautifully written and illustrated, and each story shows a very different interpretation of the many different Indigenous groups that make up our First Nations peoples in Canada. I've seen university professors and teachers alike use this text to study Indigenous peoples and ways of life, learning, and being with their classes. It is connected on a far deeper level with myself and other students alike than any documentary or textbook ever could. Besides reading comics, how can we use comics to... Harvard Graduate School of Education cites comics as having 3 exemplary benefits for learning. 1, they can facilitate a better understanding of complex required texts by serving as a preliminary reading activity. 2, they can extend the analysis of a classic work of literature, either by providing examples of derivative fiction or by making strong allusions to the classics. 3, they can replace less accessible works from the literary canon while still conveying the same messages and using the same literary and rhetorical conventions. Outside of simply reading comics, making comics and studying translating ideas into comic prose and form can be very beneficial for students. For example, Translating a historical event or scene into the form of a comic book or strip requires far deeper inquiry, understanding, and historical context than simply writing a reflection or a hypothetical letter. Students have to think about what that period would look like, how it would feel, how the historical figures would emote, carry themselves, and what they might be thinking during the events depicted. Decoding historical readings into a series of visual interpretations really requires students to connect with the material on a deeper level and to make their own interpretations and creative ideas of what happened and what it could have looked like visually. For another reason comics are an effective classroom tool, simply look to the culture of the students filling our classrooms. I have had countless conversations with my students about comics, particularly manga and anime, and their interest in these aspects of pop culture. My history class last term, for example, comprising of 30 students in all, I can name at least 15 students within that class who possess deep interest in manga and anime. My other 2 drama classes would average about the same, almost 50% of students at least interested in these 2 mediums. Because of manga and anime's high standing within the cultural zeitgeist, comics and manga study within the classroom can create a great opportunity to connect with our students and relate course material to their own personal interests. On a final note, I will tell a personal story, my own education story. When I entered high school, I was on a steady downward slope of disinterest and apathy towards my studies. I was losing interest in my coursework besides a couple of passion areas, namely drama and history. I would spend close to 70% of each school day sitting quietly in class, drawing original comics on white printer paper with a pencil and eraser. I did well in my courses, but any sense of interest or passion was gone, and 90% of the time, I would rather be drawing comics than doing anything else. Since I was very young, all I have ever wanted to do was tell the plethora of stories that lived rent-free in my head. And to me, comics was the most interesting medium with which to pursue this. My grade 9 drama teacher took notice of the mounds of paper I carried around with me everywhere I went, littered with character concepts, cover ideas, and paneling of different comics and stories. Outside of his career as a teacher, he was an accomplished graphic novelist within the local industry, and he made an arrangement with my principal to offer a one-on-one course for me during my spare. In this course, we would focus entirely on comic technique and practice, for which I would even receive a credit. This teacher put in countless hours of his time, energy, and hard work to make this a possibility for me. And over the next 2 years of taking this course with him, I was able to learn a great deal about technique to better my art and storytelling within the medium. Both years, he purchased for me a booth at Winnipeg Comic Con and printed my books for me, providing an opportunity to expose me to the local industry, network with other comics people, and share my hard work with the community. He reinvigorated my passion and showed me that my dreams could in fact be a reality, and working in comics was more than a pipe dream. I am no accomplished graphic novelist, award-winning writer, or anything of the sort, but I have been working in the industry and creating independent comics and graphic novels that I exhibit and sell at the local convention for close to 10 years now. That teacher was the driving force for me to continue my education and find a new passion for school, as well as to drive me to aim to provide the same life-changing education for other people. My high school drama teacher, who noticed my passion and took a shot to help me pursue it, with the help of comics, he changed everything for me.